and Stuart are not here, but we can proceed.
Sure, they'll join us. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the pre-application forum on Thursday, the 24th of September. Please note that the public session of the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. Can all attendees switch off their cameras and mute their microphones when not speaking? The camera and microphone should only be switched on when you're invited to speak. Guidance on how to do this is contained in the guidance issued to you. I'll now ask the clerk to advise the members participating today, and for all members to confirm their attendance once their name has been announced by the clerk, so that it's clear for the recording of the meeting and can also be recorded by the clerk for the minute. Ms. McBain, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, convener. So I'll just do a roll call. So just please indicate if you're present. Councillor Bolton.
I'm here.
Councillor Stewart.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Allen. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I'm here.
Councillor Copeland.
Yes, present.
Councillor Cormie.
Here.
Councillor Gregg.
Here.
Councillor Malik.
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. At the pre-application forum today, we have two sites, the former Craighill School, which is application 200850, and it's a major residential development for approximately 105 units, 90 apartments and 15 terrace house, associated streets, parking and external amenity. We have 5 people coming to speak on that. We have Mark Thompson, who is GM Architects, Henry McGowan is GM Architects, Andrew Lowe from Faithful and Gould, Ewan Scott Ramsey and Charmers, and Colin Doyle from Aberdeen City Council. Following that, there'll be one on the former Kingcorth Academy, which is 200989. Again, a major residential development of approximately 213 units, comprising of mixed unit types, associated street parking and amenity. We have Ricky Connell from Atkins Architects, Stephen McGarrity from in Architects, and Colin Doig again from Aberdeen City Council. So if we could just go back to the agenda. So can I just check that everybody's got their procedural notes, which is at page 3 to 6. Okay, if I could get agreement, we have the minute of the previous meeting of the 20th of August, which was the land south and west of Deeside Bray, Leggett Bray, Aberdeen 200638. Can I just get agreement that was an accurate minute? That's any sense? That's great.
Good.
Okay, super, thank you. If we can now just move on to the pre-application reports. As I say, the first one is the former Craighill School, and we have, let me just check. Apologies for getting to the page. We have Danique is going to bring us through that. Danique? Danica, sorry.
No.
You get it wrong.
I will see if I can share my screen.
Thank you.
Oh, here we go. I think it's that one. Is the presentation coming up?
Thank you. We see it.
Okay. Right, so the following proposal is for pre-application notice for a major residential development of around 105 units on the site of the former Craighill Primary School in Kingcorth. So let me just go through the slide. Is it changing to the next slide? Because I can't see it on. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
The proposed development site would extend to about 1.6 hectares and is bounded by residential properties on Heatherwick Road to the north, Gardner Road to the west and south, and Gardner Drive to the east. There's also a small parade of shops located here to the south. Existing development consists mainly of a mix of 3-story flats and rows of 2-story terraced houses. So as you can see in this aerial photograph, all the buildings have now been cleared off the site. The buildings were located on the western half of the site, with the school playing fields to the east here. A cluster of mature trees is located at the southwest corner of the site, and there are some existing residential properties, a bungalow and a block of 3-story flats in the southeast corner. A previous application was submitted in 2016 for the construction of 79 residential units on the site, A site layout was agreed with officers, but before the legal agreement was signed, this application was withdrawn. So this slide shows the current allocations under the existing 2017 Aberdeen Local Development Plan. The western part of the site is allocated as Opportunity Site 57 and is considered suitable for residential development. Even though not part of this allocation, the remainder of the site is designated as part of an existing residential area. Policy H1 would therefore apply, which basically sets out that residential development is acceptable in principle, provided that any development would not result in overdevelopment, would not have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area, would not result in a loss of valuable and valued open space, and would comply with all relevant supplementary guidance. As the eastern part of the site was last used as playing fields in association with the school, policy NE3, which is urban green space, would also apply. This policy sets out that in general, permission will not be granted to redevelop any playing fields unless an equivalent and equally accessible area for public open space is laid out and made available in the immediate surrounding area. Other policies that will be important in the determination of the proposal are listed in the report, but include D1 in relation to the overall site layout and design of the development, H3 in relation to density, H4 in relation to the housing mix, and NE5 in relation to the protection of existing mature trees on the site. A list of supporting documents required to be submitted as part of the application is also included in the report. As said before, a proposal of application notice was submitted at the end of July. As part of this, a public consultation event will need to be undertaken, but given the current COVID-19 restrictions, this is likely to take the format of a virtual event rather than a more traditional physical event. At the moment, no details have been submitted as to when this will take place. So finally, the next steps in the proposal are for the applicant to undertake their pre-application consultation, and any details will need to be included in the pre-application consultation report, which need to be submitted as part of the application. Given the proposal of application notice was submitted at the end of July, the earliest any application can be submitted will be the end of October or beginning of November. So there's a minimum of 12 weeks after the validation of the POAN. So that is it.
Okay, thanks very much, Danica. We'll take questions after we hear from the applicant. So if I could hand over to the applicant, I don't know who wants to speak first from them.
It will be myself, Mark Thompson. I'll just share my screen with you. Thanks very much for your time to everyone, and Danica for your overview of the site. Let me just full screen this to. Can everyone see this okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. I won't labour some of the points that Danica's already made, but the site is yet located in the Craighill area of Aberdeen. What we're showing here is this large expanse of real quality space in close proximity to a number of other residential properties and some mature tree clusters that are located around the side of the site. So fantastic opportunity for a development, and what we are involved in is one of a number of Aberdeen City Council's housing programme 2020 scheme, where there's a series of sites that are looking to create real quality affordable homes for social accommodation. The two diagrams I'm showing here really just emphasise the extent and the type of amenity that's in very short walking distance to the site. So on the left hand side, what we're showing is a large quantum of open space, of parkland, of woodland walks and so on that are within a 5 to 10 minute walk of the site. And the diagram on the right is really calling out the various amenities that are in, again, close proximity, so ranging from bus stops and transportation links to local community centres, supermarkets, schools, and all of those important amenities. So really just emphasising that we have a site with great amenity nearby. Moving on to our proposal itself, the real focus for us here is the creation of a new pedestrian-focused neighbourhood, really emphasising placemaking at the heart of all the ideas and the layout in its entirety. So what we have is to access in and out of the site for vehicular and pedestrians, but really just emphasising this shared surface home zone feel. There are clusters of apartment blocks that create courtyards for amenity. There are generous back gardens, front gardens and communal garden spaces that will be developed through subsequent stages, but again the focus is on real quality, low maintenance amenity spaces, which is becoming more popular and more important now than ever, I should say, given the current circumstances. We have the inclusion of an urban orchard and other community-led amenity spaces which are woven into the site layout. And what we're really creating here is a new street that fits into its surrounding neighbourhood. We should also note that all the batches and clusters of mature trees that are around the perimeter of the site we're maintaining and integrating into the site layout itself, just really enhancing and maintaining that quality. Moving on to the apartment and unit types themselves, there's a real emphasis through the design iterations that we've arrived at of large open windows, quality dual aspect, spacious apartments for 1 beds and 3 beds. We have housing for varying needs standards applied throughout, and dementia-friendly designs also been at the heart of our designs. Again, the dual aspect windows having large openings and comfortable spaces to inhabit have been really important for us. We're targeting gold standard level of energy efficiency, which is approved by Aberdeen City Council, and again that's been factored into all our designs. And what we've also been looking to integrate wherever possible are series of private garden space to ground floor apartments or private terraces and real accessible outdoor space to all. I should emphasise from the table that we've produced here is that we have an approximate 29% of wheelchair accessible units across the entire site, total of 99, which is slightly lower than the figure mentioned by Denica earlier, and that was just due to some resolutions in numbers. But we are far exceeding the 15% wheelchair accessible unit target with our 29%, and it's really been an emphasis and an evolution of internal quality and space. To move on just to some of our ideas and intentions in terms of placemaking, in terms of open space provision and accessible outdoor amenity. To the bottom half of the page, you can see here are just a series of precedent examples that we're relying on, really just to try and showcase what we would intend for some of the spaces. Again, it's low quality, low quality, pardon me, Freudian slip there, high quality, low maintenance external spaces for residents and the wider public to enjoy. We're looking at a mixture of soft and hard landscaped areas that will be real quality spaces to inhabit. And the diagram to the top here shows just the level of amenity that we're providing that would be further developed through subsequent stages, but that would be a mix of private garden space and communal amenity. I would just draw the attention to the building footprint figure that we have here. With we're essentially developing less than a quarter of the site, and therefore 3/4 of the site becomes a mixture of amenity and shared surface. So we have again quality at the heart of all our thoughts and designs. I'll just pass briefly over to you and our engineer, who can perhaps talk through these diagrams for me, please.
Certainly, sorry. So I'm Ewan Scott from Ramsey and Chalmers, the civil engineers for the project. I'll speak very, very briefly about the principles of the roads designs. In essence, what we need to do here is fit the site, our site, in with the sort of the wider Craighill environment, create a safe, low-speed environment, and really one with a shared surfacing feel that pedestrians feel comfortable in, and that vehicles are certainly not the priority. So we've had good discussions with the City Council Roads Department, and how we're going to achieve this low-speed, comfortable environment is short lengths of road with sharp junctions, sharp corners rather, interesting junctions, changes in surfaces. So as a design, as a driver, it keeps you thinking. Another benefit of this, and something that's really important for the site and the area, is that we have an internal road network that doesn't encourage additional traffic. So the location of our axes, or entrances, I should say, because I never say axis right, is that the entrances are away from the sort of primary traffic routes. And being a low-speed internal road network, the aim is that people are discouraged from using the site in terms of vehicles, unless you're a resident. Really, that's really all I want to say, because it's I think the design sits for itself. It's a self-enclosed site in terms of traffic, but it's an accessible site for the residents and the wider community. I'll just pass you back to Mark.
Thanks, Ewan. Yeah, another item we just raised were, I guess, in response to some of the development plan comments about shared surface and pedestrian priority, and the emphasis in trying to get using a range of transport modes and things. So we're taking that into consideration also through our design. And the last page here really just shows a mixture of precedent images to the top, where we start to explore materiality and building forms, and what we've also used. We've learned from this context, learned from these precedents, and started to explore and test some gable studies and some general arrangements. And for example, this gable study here just again talks about large open windows that provide ventilation, natural light, real quality spaces inside and out. And at the heart of the plan here, the heart of the drawing here is an overview of the site modelled up to show some of these internal streets that we're suggesting, and the creation of courtyards also that not only provide the opportunity for quality external amenity, but there's also an important security aspect there, where the amenity spaces are overlooked. So there's a safe environment, as well as an environment that's to be used for amenity. We have at the bottom of the plan here, bottom of the drawing, an indicative section through the site, which actually cuts through this internal street. I guess what we're showing here is that there's a real animated quality to it that will be created as a result of our proposal. We have the layering of landscape, which would grow through time. We would have also just the difference in building types and typologies, the mixture of apartments and terraces, and I guess real just quality spaces to inhabit that would bring life and character to the streets around. And I guess I could just leave you with the comment from the Council Resource Committee that talks of Aberdeen leading the way in investing in social infrastructure, and I guess that's really at the heart of this scheme, amongst others. So I think that's probably it. I think that's certainly our last slide, and yeah, I think I've covered everything.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll take questions for you. Maybe if I kick off, I'll give people time to think. Can I noticed on one of your slides you talked about sort of balconies. Now I know that in previous schemes we have involved, and we're seeing it more and more now, is obviously the police involved in sort of safety architecture, and obviously balconies used to be something that they kind of frowned upon. Are you speaking to police in terms of ensuring that you've already talked about the safety of being able to watch your kids play and stuff with the courtyards, but in terms of the actual design of the buildings, will you be working with the police to make sure that we design out any kind of easy targets?
Well, absolutely. In terms of general safety and balcony design, there are standards and minimums that we would need to be adhered to anyway in terms of building regulations. So balcony and balustrade heights, openings, proximity to roads and so on. These things are all considered by safety in terms of people walking past your garden spaces and windows and so on. That has been considered. There are essentially strips of landscaped buffer of varying widths that would be and create private spaces between, would create boundaries between. So while we're not putting up or proposing to put up massive fences around each and every property, that there certainly will be fences of a certain kind, and they would be varying in height depending on their exact location. But absolutely, it's a consideration that we're aware of and that we're working to also.
Okay. Just kind of one final point.
Sorry, Bolton, sorry, just to emphasise what Mark's talking about, that secure by design will be a component of our application when it's formal.
Excellent, thank you. I'll just ask one more point and then I'll hand over to some of my colleagues. We've talked about obviously the designing the streets and giving precedent to the sort of the pedestrian and not the car. Can I just check about where the parking would be for any cars and also bicycles?
Yes, so if I just briefly flip back to our site plan here, what we have are a series of parking clusters that are created for the general use of the apartment blocks, and there's private driveway parking for terraces. So we've tried to weave parking as best we can into the site layout without perhaps overly dominating it with too large sections and clusters. So there's a good spread of spaces around that meets the minimums required in terms of the ratio. And we had a good conversation with some of your colleagues at the Roads Department, Aberdeen Council Roads Department recently, and we've talked through the numbers that we're proposing currently, their locations, and they're generally quite happy with what we're proposing at the moment, and we seem to be on track to meet all the ratios and targets. As to cycling provision, we're not locating them on this particular plan because it's fairly high level at the moment, but we have allowed for cycle stores externally, just as part of the general scheme, and there will be all the associated visitor cycle parking hoops stands as required that will again be positioned in close proximity normally to building entrances, and they will be peppered across the site, I suppose, to put it one way, but certainly has been thought about and certainly allowed for.
Mark, can you also mention the electrical charging points for cars, please?
Of course, there's as part of the general gold standard and site-wide provision for charging, we have 50% charging capacity allowed for across the site. So at approximately 190 spaces, we're allowing for 50% of the vehicle charging. And that would be again distributed evenly across the site, and we're also allowing for disabled access parking with the associated boundary strips and accommodation around that also.
Can I just ask on the charging points? I appreciate you'll put in sort of 50% at the moment, but will we put in infrastructure under the ground so that if we wanted to add at a later date, it's just something sort of future proofing? Not that I'm assuming we'll suddenly all turn 100% electric, but just in case for future.
I believe so. I believe that generally the infrastructure will be in place to accommodate that future proofing. I think 50% is the target for live spaces, live charging points. But I believe that with the infrastructure and the ducting and the cabling and everything that's in ground in place, there is provision there for it, I'm sure. Excellent,
thank you. Councillor Stewart, I saw you, then Councillor Cook, then Councillor Gregg. So Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Found the presentation very helpful, actually. I just wanted to ask, and maybe I missed it or didn't quite hear, is there to be any sort of provision for that local amenity of shops?
Sorry, by that, do you mean will there be retail units on the site?
Well, yeah, I suppose, yes. I suppose that's the modern way. I'm just speaking an old-fashioned way of shops. Yes, go to the shops and get your messages. Okay, yeah, yes, I mean, because I asked that because it's reflective of our earlier planning decisions made this morning, and as areas grow, although what you're proposing, who's to say how that will actually, if approved, grow. And I'm always mindful that where people live, they do need some local facilities to get milk and bread and so on.
As it stands, no, there's no provision on site for any retail or any shops or anything like that. It's just purely a residential development. We do have, albeit a local shop, as noted earlier, there is a local shop within a short walking distance from the site, and there are some more just a wee bit further afield, but no, there's no intention at the moment to put any shops on that site.
Okay, thank you. And a supplementary to that, convener, please. It's just about the areas to sit out, because I did hear you talk about local amenity areas and how important that is, particularly now. Who knows how long now will go on for, so people do need areas to sit out.
Yes, it's part of the ongoing design development of the site. So if just looking at the site plan as we have it now, there's a There's shaded orange and green areas essentially to call out what is amenity, be it private or public. These spaces are being developed, and the intention is that they would be for public use to be enjoyed by residents for the larger communal areas. Another point I suppose I should note, which is touches more on the internal spaces, is that the apartments, the unit types, the flats are so big and designed as such to accommodate a home office zone in each of the spaces. It was a requirement for housing for varying needs, but and also the Aberdeen City Council's briefing information. But what we are ensuring is that the spaces we're providing are very generous, enough to accommodate internal home office zone. But to talk back to your point of external spaces, that will become the next layer of our focus, I suppose. It's really to layer up the quality of these spaces and detail out what they might be. But certainly the intention is that there would be a good amount of it for everyone to enjoy.
Okay, thank you. Just one more on that. And again, it's just the question is reflective of the area that I represent. When you said the large amenity areas for people to sit, I think that's great to have that. It's not everyone has a garden, but you said it'd be for the use of those that lived in that complex. How can you actually manage that? Because some of the areas that I represent, and I'm not going to identify which areas they are, but I could express that they have that seating and grass area that is only meant for the private properties that are there. But some of the complaints that I get is that Joe Blogs comes along and just uses it as well. Or will you be trying to manage that in such a way that it is just people that are in the complex, or you know, I mean, I realise it'd be a difficult one to actually police as such, but I just wondered what your thoughts, or had you considered that?
I think certainly for the ground floor areas immediately adjacent to some of the apartments and some of the private gardens would be private gardens, but to talk about the areas immediately in front and behind the apartment blocks themselves, we would look to, I suppose, integrate a series of boundaries through either vegetation or through some sort of landscaping that would perhaps suggest and imply that there's a semi-private nature to them. And
Mark, can I make we just
sure.
Keep it very, very simple. Every single space adjacent to every single block would be private in both the apartments, Councillor Stewart. All the front and back gardens will be private to the terraced units, and the only space that people could or will be able to access would be the road system or the streets if they're crossing the neighbourhood to go from one side of the site to the other or through it. So that delineation between public and private will be very, very, very clearly demarcated in the design.
Thank you. That's all I needed to know. Thank you, convener. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Cook.
Thanks, convener. Thanks for the presentation. Really good. Dinica's report mentions policy C1 on digital infrastructure. Are we intending to have fibre to the premises for these units?
Andy, are you able to comment on that one for me, please?
Yeah, I'll pick that up. Councillor Cook, we haven't quite got to that stage yet. We're just at RIBA stage 2, so it's merely from a budget and a brief validation point just now. But we'll be picking up that along with other utilities in the next RIBA stage 3 as we develop the project going forward.
Councillor Cook.
Thanks. That was the only question I had, because the other ones have already been answered.
Okay.
See, we're all great minds think alike, Councillor Cook. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I wanted to ask about the use of the open space. The inclusion of the walled garden and the community orchard will require some ongoing management and organisation, some concerted efforts. I wondered how's that going to be done?
Mark, I can pick this up
Okay,
again,
yeah,
and then
sure, yeah.
Colin, feel free to jump in from the city. I'll take the orchard first. Urban orchard, we're thinking kind of raised sleeper beds there with vegetables and fruit in there as well. Fairly low maintenance, you know, kind of 6 square feet really, with access for those within the development there. So they'll be maintained in effect by the residents within the site. In terms of the open space, I know we showed a lot of green here, but the focus is very much on low maintenance. There'll be a lot of hard landscaping as well, a lot of trees, and we're taking precedent of some of the previous developments at Manor Walk and Smithfields as well. Again, we're just in the process of appointing a landscape architect, and because this is RIBA Stage 2, we'll be getting on board for RIBA Stage 3 just to develop that up. But we're doing that in unison with Aberdeen City Council's maintenance team as well to ensure that there's not a terrible amount of OPEX committed to this.
Okay, thank you. It may be too early to ask, but would there be resident involvement in the management of the orchard, the walled garden, and so forth?
There's flexibility there. I mean, we're moving with the city's policies on this. You know, if they wish to take ownership of that, and there is you know, sufficient tools and stuff.
I think maybe taking Stephen. Yeah, I was going to say, I noticed your hand up.
Sorry, that's kind of technical questions around long-term maintenance to the design team. We're also acting on the council's instructions. So what we're doing around some of these spaces and what makes them quite exciting in terms of the community orchard is working with our communities teams in the area to look at how they can be taken on by the community groups and residents, how that ties into things like the Aberdeen food growing strategy and other community projects in the area. So even at this stage where we've not started construction, those conversations are ongoing, and again, they're aligned with lots of other council policies. Hopefully that's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And if I could just ask, kind of related to that, there is on the other side of Gardner Drive a play park, which is quite close by, but will there be play facilities for young people on site?
That the exact makeup of all the amenity, including the provision of children's play parks and spaces, will be developed through the next stage once we have the landscape architect involved. So we normally look to the quantums of open space and the types as requested by or through the Aberdeen development plan and close coordination with the planning officers as well. So that's certainly part of, or would form part of designs as they go forward. The exact extent we're just starting to I suppose get involved with at the moment. Okay,
thank you for that. I like that the principles of inclusive design are being followed. So this is looking at people of all ages and all abilities, all kinds of physical and cognitive abilities. So that's all good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask a quick question? It's actually about the refuge. Again, are we looking to locate that? I know it's at early doors, but obviously minimising the use, sort of the intrusion of the large refuge vehicles. Is there a decision around that and recycling?
Well, yes, the terraced properties themselves have small individual bin stores to the front of the property, so the refuse vehicle could collect on street. And as part of the overall site design, we have had the movement of vehicles, refuse and emergency vehicles in mind, and we've carried out some tracking exercise to make sure that we can accommodate essentially bin stores presented to street and in close proximity to apartment blocks. So while we haven't detailed those exact positions right now, we're quite happy and quite comfortable that we can accommodate them without too much intrusion and also to the satisfaction of the refuse and recycling teams.
Okay, that's excellent. Councillor Stewart, your hand's still up. Was that from the last time? Oh, thank you.
Is that it down?
Yes, it's down.
Okay,
Thanks.
sorry, thank you.
Has anybody got any more questions for either Danica or for the applicant? No? Okay, well, I think we'll all look forward to the next stage of the process, and it'll be interesting to see how you get on with your virtual consultation with the public. I'm sure that'll throw up its challenges, but appreciate your time today. It looks very exciting, and it's nice to see some good quality housing being brought forward for up at Craig Hill. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We'll move on to the former King Corth Academy. It's Dinica again, and it's application 200989. Dinica.
Hang on.
It's okay, don't worry.
Here we go. Right, let me just share the presentation again.
Okay.
Okay, is that the presentation up now?
It is, thanks.
Okay, good. Right, so this following proposal is for a pre-application notice for development at the former King Corth Academy site. The proposal will be a major development of around 215 units, or that says 213 on site, associated open space, landscaping and infrastructure. So if we go and have a look at the location plan, the proposed development would extend to about 4 hectares and is bounded by residential properties on King Corth Circle and Deville Gardens to the north, Cairnville Terrace to the west, Cairngorm Drive to the south and Alden Place to the east. To the north, immediately opposite the site, are the King Corth playing fields, which is a large area of open space that incorporates a football pitch, skate park and playground. In the far corner here, you can see the site that we've just been talking about, so they really are very close to each other. So as can be seen here, just like the Craig Hill site, all the buildings have been removed from the site. These were mainly contained in the eastern half, with the playing fields and tennis courts on the western side. There's some mature trees located along the boundary on the northern side, on the northern boundary and along the southern boundary, and some along the west. And there's a mature hedge as well along the west and the south boundary. There's a distinct change in levels between this part of the site and that part of the site. So if we move on to the current local plan allocations, in this case the entire site has been allocated as OP 105 in the current local plan, and it was considered acceptable for residential development. The surrounding area is considered a residential, with this area, which is shaded blue, and is the King Corth playing fields, as an urban green space. The very similar policies apply here as to the previous proposal. So there'll be H1, which sets out a principle for residential development in a residential area, and D1, which focuses on quality of design. And again, similar to the previous site, policy NE3 will need to be considered as part of the site was previously used as sport pitches serving the school. Again, a list of supporting documents which are required to be submitted as part of the application is included in the report. So again, there's a requirement to hold a public consultation event, which is likely going to be virtual again. The results will need to be summarised in a pre-application consultation report, which will need to be submitted as part of the application. This proposal of application notice was submitted at the end of August, so no application can be submitted until at least the end of November, which is again 3 months after the submission of the plan. So are there any questions on this?
Okay, well, we'll maybe take you in after. We'll hear from the applicant and see if members have got any. Okay, thank you very much. Over to the applicant. I'll leave you to decide who wants to speak. Is it Ricky or?
Yeah, it's Ricky. Hi, Mary. Hi, Convener.
Hiya.
Mary. How are you? Afternoon, everybody. Let me just quickly share my screen. So thank you, Danique, for that introduction to the site. So again, following on from what from Mark and from Henry's presentation, I think the set of slides you're about to see are sort of fairly similar in content, just to keep that consistency across the two sites, given that their general locale. I think, as you know, King Corth and Craig Hill are pretty close together. Our site's the largest site there in red, and Craighill that Mark's just taken us through is just off to the southwest. Again, it's the former Kincorth Academy, which was demolished sort of this time last year, and the site's now completely clear. And despite COVID restrictions, we have managed to get somebody to nip the site locally and get some photographs for us, and just show that that is. It's a large site. It's a quality site. It offers a great opportunity for Aberdeen City Council to develop a residential development on this site. We're obviously both sites are part of the Aberdeen Housing Plan 2020, and our initial brief is for 184 units, largely split up into majority of 1-bed and 2-bed flats, and then 3-bed semi-detached houses with varying needs. And originally we had a bungalow on site, but that's now since been removed. We're also designing to gold standard and to housing for varying needs, and a minimum of 15% wheelchair accessible. And I think touching on one of the questions that the Councillor Stewart raised in terms of the accessing the police, we do have a Secure by Design application underway with Police Scotland, based out of Stonehaven. So that's all in place. So that was our original brief for 184 and a density of about 50 units per hectare. Again, similar diagrams, pick it up on the locale, the two sites. We're sitting immediately adjacent to the opens plan of that Danique's just introduced in terms of the Kincorth Park on playing fields, where there's a football pitch on site, and there is a skate park and some play activities immediately adjacent to it. The Grampian Hills, as they're known locally, just to the south. And in terms of amenity, again, we've picked up the same idea. The major bus route runs Cairngorm Drive east-west, right immediately to the site, and within about 500 metres is the main centre of Kincorth suburb, where all the library, shops are all located. So we're fairly well connected on that front. In terms of the challenge of the site, I think Danique also picked up that the topography on the site and explained it very succinctly. So north to east to west, we've got a 7-metre rise again on Cairngorm Drive, and going north along Deevale and Cairnvale, we've probably got about a 10-metre rise across the site. The purple strips here that run through are the major changes in level, particularly between the two football pitches and green space, and then what was the former buildings of the academy. So some major changes in level to deal with there. Again, around the boundary, we got fairly mature trees and some mature hedging. And we've also looked at then in terms of how we respond to that in terms of developing parcels of land that deal with the topography, that work with the topography rather than trying to work against it, minimise our cut and fill off site. And we've also then started to look at where appropriate we can bring road junctions in off the existing road network to access the site. Again, similar to what Mark has proposed at Craighill, we've got a one road through the majority of the site. We're proposing that would be adopted by the City Council, and our east-west boulevard here on the east would then become shared amenity space, giving the use of the space over to the residents and pedestrians rather than the car. And separately, we'll have separate accesses for the north and the southwest parcels of land. We certainly didn't want to. We've split the road network through because we didn't want us through and through. We didn't want to encourage cars getting through the site all the way through. So we've tried to limit that. We've used the landscaping as well to create fingers of green space that go through the site to be able to open the space up. I think historically when the school was there, it created a very strong boundary to the residents particularly on the south, maybe trying to access the park and Kincorth in the north. There was no real through route unless you nipped through the school grounds during daytime, and then that would be locked down at night. So what we've tried to do is try to make sure we open the space up and give the residents that live both within the boundary of the site and out with the boundary of the site the opportunity to engage with the landscaping and permeate their way through the site. And largely then in terms of context of the buildings to the north, we've kept our buildings low rise to the north and created the higher rise 3-storey buildings and flatted developments to the south to try and rebuild the urban fabric along what is the main arterial route through the site along Cairngorm Drive. And in terms of our site layout, just in a bit more detail, we've gone from the initial 184 units in the brief up to 213. So we've challenged that. We've challenged the density a little bit. We've responded to some of Denique's comments in our pre-application, and certainly you can see here our major landscaping strips that run north-south to create the permeability to the site have then allowed us to create parcels of development in separate bits, which also will hopefully help longer term in terms of our construction, that we can develop that in parcels and release that in different stages back to be occupied rather than one hit because of the size of the site. So that's of benefit. We're using the landscaping strips as well to minimize cut and fill, so we're keeping everything on site. We've pulled our building boundaries away from the edge of the site to maintain that mature tree line that runs particularly along the west and particularly along the north and the south, to make sure that that's pretty much there. Again, picking up on, I think, one of the comments, we've got the appropriate car parking spaces. We're going for slightly enhanced from the 50% blanket electrical vehicle charging across the site. We're going for 100% for the terraced houses, so every house will have connection. And then for the parking that's associated with the flats, we've gone for 50%, so one every other bay, or one unit to serve 2 bays, but the infrastructure below ground will be sized to allow that to go to 100% in the future, should that be needed. And we've started to show in a little bit more detail in terms of our bicycle stores and our bin stores and how they would be located in the flatted developments and also then on the driveways at the front of the terraced houses. And picking up a similar theme, we've shown some precedent images, and I think probably some of the images are actually the same as what Mark had put up by coincidence. We've started to look at the massing of that and how that would start to look, and really emphasizing that placemaking approach and home zones that Mark alluded to as well. Certainly, we've looked at in terms of our type of open space. We've sort of graphically represented this in 3 ways. We've got our public landscaping in the light green that sort of is all around the site. We've looked then in terms of the smaller courtyards, in terms of the bundles of the flatted units, of having some semi-private spaces that allow the residents to take ownership of those and maybe create some sort of boundary that it's not for people out with the development to be using. That's purely for the flatted developments. And then of course on the terrace houses themselves, they'll have their own private back gardens as part of that. In terms of that development, that sort of works its way in. We've got about 40% of the site is open space, and that breaks itself down into the percentages of 28% of it is fully open, 8% of it's that communal amenity, semi-private, and again 4% of it is into the private gardens of the terraced houses. Again, we started to look at some of the materiality of how that might look and how the studies might look in terms of how that might come across. And again, picking up that it's large window formats, particularly when we're looking at dementia friendly and housing for varying needs. And residents may be elderly, maybe spend a lot of their time could be wheelchair based or bedridden, that we want to make sure that at all times they've got a view out and plenty of daylight in. So we're using full floor to ceiling height windows as much as we possibly can in bedrooms and lounge rooms to make sure that they've got that visual connection to the outside. The diagram again in the middle, again, it's just showing a massing study of how we've developed that up. So our terraced houses along the north are 2-story, keeping them low key because the houses, the existing houses that sit to the north are 2-story. So we've tried to reflect that and keep the density a little bit down on that side. But as we come to the south of the site, where we've got 3 and 4-story accommodation starting to wrap around, we've reflected that and gone 3-story across all the flatted developments around again. We've stolen the same quote that Mark had from the committee. And then again, we've had our pre-application discussions with Denique and we've sort of listed some of the comments that Denique has made and how we've responded to that in terms of making adjustments to our site plan. And our overall progress is we're sort of maybe about 3 to 4 weeks behind the programme that the JM are on Craig Hill, but we're looking to try and pull some of that back a little bit. Our planning application is not due to go in our programme until the end of January 2001, but I think picking up on the comments on probably that the consultation event will likely end up being electronic or via this means rather than by a public consultation. I think there's certainly a will between both JM architects and Atkins architects that we try and collaborate on that and maybe do that as a shared event, same as what we're doing today, and make sure that we have that sort of we're going hand in hand with the two sites, particularly because they're so close in relation to each other, that we feel there's a positiveness there that we can try and bring together to the table for the benefit for Aberdeen City Council, for the housing programme, and ultimately for the residents. I think that's our last slide, so I'll hand that back to the convener.
Okay, thanks very much. Just one point, and it's probably pertinent to both of you, and you're talking about being collaborative, but something that would have been nice to have seen. We've seen a lot about community open space, but it could have been a suggestion of maybe having something like an area for a man shed or a communal building. So if they were looking after the orchard and stuff, it would have somewhere for them to be able to kind of, I suppose, have as a hub for the community, this new community. So I just wondered if it's something that you could just take on board to consider.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we have had discussions in the background with Gordon McLean from the environmental department and sort of had that initial discussion about what do the communal amenity spaces mean in terms of food growing, the urban orchards that Mark's alluded to, and how that sort of integrates itself into the site. So we have started those discussions, and we'll continue those discussions with Gordon and his team as to what it is we actually end up providing. And a man shed opportunity might be one good one.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I mean, and I think it's quite important. And I think it was Councillor Stewart alluded to the last about having the sort of the private nature of the space, so that there was a sense of ownership for the individuals. And I think you're more likely, if they feel that it's their space as opposed to it's the council space, there's more chance of them actually wanting and feeling empowered to look after it. So it's reassuring that those conversations are going on. Can I find? I mean, you've obviously you had the opportunity to throw in some answers before we needed to ask them.
It's always the advantage of going second.
Absolutely. But I will still see if any of my colleagues can pull out a question for you. Councillor Gregg.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask, what is the plot ratio in this development?
We've got a 213. So in terms of, I think there's one of the slides there we had a wee breakdown. So I think we're roughly about the same. We're about a quarter. So 22% of building footprint is of the site, and the rest of it's then given over to open space. 40% open space, and then that's 37% is then given over to roads and shared surfaces.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I was asking because obviously there's the loss of playing fields of open spaces. So it's good to know that consideration is being given to that balance. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Cook.
Thanks, convener. If I ask the same question on this one as I asked about the last one, i.e. fibre to the premises for broadband, is it the same answer?
It probably is, yeah. But certainly our M&E colleagues are in discussions with the fibre optic deliveries, and that's certainly the intention. If assuming budgets can stretch to that, it is the intention to be fibre to all properties.
Thanks. That was my only question.
Yeah, I could maybe add to that, Councillor Bolton, that obviously City Fibre are doing a rollout on behalf of City Region Dale, of which Council is a partner at the moment. So we're making introductions to City Fibre around the site and see how it fits into their programme.
Excellent, that's good news. Particularly given everybody's having to work from, well, a lot of people are working from home at the moment. Can I just ask one other question? Obviously, the council's got a commitment to veterans housing. Now, obviously, some of those may have been injured, in Afghanistan, etc. So it's really positive to hear that we're going to have accessible housing there. But has there been any discussions with you in terms of providing specifically a percentage for veterans?
No, we haven't had that discussion yet. Although I mean, we do have the housing for varying needs is quite strong across both sites. I think Mark did put up a figure for Craig Hill on the number of ground floor flats that would be wheelchair accessible. I think we've had a quick calculation. We're roughly about 35 to 40% of ground floor flats are wheelchair accessible. So we've got a very, very high percentage of wheelchair accessible. And I think as well on both sites, because of the housing for varying needs and the gold standard, there is the requirement for adaptability. as part of the layouts. That if somebody does become disabled and needs their house adapted, that has to be built into our structure in the house, that we can easily do that in the future.
Okay, Mel, I see you've popped your hand up.
Just to talk about the veterans housing, and all of that will be incorporated into the allocations policy, and when we're at the stage where we're allocating the units, then that'll be picked up.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. And I think, again, you know, I think that's where the benefit of perhaps things like a man shed, that always comes into its own. Any other questions from anyone? Nope, I don't see any more hands. Okay, well, again, thank you very much for your presentation today. Again, we'll look forward to you coming back to the next stage, and good luck with your either joint or solo virtual consultation.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today.
No, but I appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully our comments or questions have been helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and that concludes the pre-application for today. And the next one will be probably in November, following the next planning meeting. So thanks all very much for today, though. Thank you.
Thank you, convener.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you.
Be well.